After beginning his rehab stint in dominant fashion yesterday, when will Bryan Woo return? And what will the Mariners do with Emerson Hancock when he does? We'll answer that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. This is Ty Dane Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. And this is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions. And we're going to start here with Ian, who wants to know who will replace Luis Urías if he goes on the injured list: Sam Haggerty, or Ryan Bliss, or Samad Taylor. So, of course, yesterday, during game 2 of yesterday's doubleheader, Luis Urías was hit on the hand wrist area in the second inning. He was able to finish that inning both on the base pass and defensively, but was later pinch hit for by Josh Rojas. So it's possible he could land on the IL. And if he does, Colby, who do you think takes his spot?
I think it's probably going to be Haggerty. He would be I would say the overwhelming favorite in this scenario. The interesting thing here is that you don't need to call up somebody who would, in theory, directly take Urias's role, which in the first 20 some odd games has been almost a straight platoon with Rojas. Because you already have that player on the roster. His name's Dylan Moore. So Dylan Moore kind of replaces Urías in that role. So what you have to do now is you have to replace Dylan Moore's role, which for the most part has been outfield against left-handed pitching. A little bit of shortstop sometimes when, JP needed a day off. So, but yeah, mostly Demo's been an outfielder this year. So you kind of need somebody who, can play the outfield. It doesn't hurt if they can play the infield, but it's not 100% necessary. And it would help if they could hit left-handed pitching, if they had a track record of hitting left-handed pitching. And that's all Sam Haggerty right there. And Haggerty has actually been up and down with the Mariners for the last few years and done some really nice things for Seattle when he has been in the big leagues. He also traditionally hits left-handed pitching very well. He's a much better hitter from the right side than he is the left side, but he does have the switch hit ability, which is a nice little bonus here. We know he can steal bases. We know he's pretty good in the outfield defensively. We know he can play second a little bit. So that while that also, all those characteristics also apply to Samad Taylor, Haggerty is the guy who has kind of earned that right to be the first guy up in a situation like this. So I think it's Haggerty. It could be Taylor would probably be number 2 on my list. Ryan Bliss is not a third baseman. He is not an outfielder. It's not that he's not athletic enough to play those positions. It's just that he hasn't. So you're calling him up. He's never played in the outfield before. There's not a lot of at-bats to get in the infield. You're adding him to the 40-man, which means you have to DFA somebody else. So it's a little more complicated than just calling up Haggerty and putting Urías on the IL. So I think Bliss is probably in the background. Plus, if you're calling up Ryan Bliss, you want to play him because he's still a guy that you're hoping can develop into something. Yeah. And so calling him up and just having him sit for, 5 days in a row, hoping to find one left-handed pitcher that you could start him at second and then play Polanco at third, I guess. I don't know. So I don't think Bliss is the answer here, although he's had a very nice spring that has extended into Tacoma as well. One name I'd throw out there that wasn't mentioned here, Cade Marlowe could come into play because, again, you don't necessarily need an infielder.
Right. It's just someone that essentially takes Dylan Moore's left field reps because Dylan Moore is going to take Urías' third base reps.
Right. So that's why Marlowe could come into play here. The thing with Marlowe, though, is that Seattle's already having a difficult time managing at-bats for their corner outfielders right now. And not that we need to get into it, but we've already told them how they could do it, but they seem to not think that's a possibility or whatever, despite Luke Raley having 2 of his last 3 starts to be very good. But, whatever. No, God forbid.
It's
So I don't think
fascinating what happens when you actually put him in the lineup.
imagine that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be Marlowe, though, because that's another lefty. I don't think they want to add another lefty. I think they would prefer a right-handed bat to replace Urías. And to me, that's Haggerty. So when you factor in everything here, from the roster construction to, having done it before, and the trust factor that the Mariners would have in a guy like Haggerty, who they've seen do it repeatedly, I think Haggerty is the clear answer here. I don't know if it should be Haggerty, but I don't think that there's a big enough difference between Haggerty and Taylor and Bliss at this stage. And I think Haggerty just checks most of the boxes for what would actually need from this roster spot.
Right. And when you've heard Justin Hollander talk about Haggerty recently, it seems like he's kind of the guy that's first in line to get that call up. And I think even back in Milwaukee, when Ty France had to go on the paternity list, that would have been Haggerty had he not still been rehabbing from his own ailment at the time. So I think it's Haggerty. I think he'll be the one that gets the call up if Urías has to go on the IL, but hopefully that's not the case, and Urías is able to stick around here.
Right. Initial reports is that it's contusion, but the way these things work a lot of the time is that the swelling happens so quickly that they can't get good imaging of the wrist itself. So it's labeled as a contusion. The swelling goes down, then they can get a look with an MRI, and then a lot of the times how he was hit, like specifically when you watch the replay, it's not uncommon for that exact injury to, or is it that exact scenario to lead to a fractured wrist or something like that. So, fingers crossed, but even if it's just swelling and he's not going to be able to play for a few days, they still might consider popping him on the IL just so that they have a bench spot that they can use for the next 2 weeks and just make sure that he gets right and all of that. So hopefully it's just the bruise, but just because that's what it was initially diagnosed doesn't mean that's all it is, because these things, the swelling has to go down. You have to get a clear picture of it. So hopefully it's just a bruise, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if there was a fracture.
Next question here comes from Matthew. Assuming health and once Woo is ready to return, could you see the Mariners going with a 6-man rotation for a little while? Starting Tuesday, they play 52 games in 55 days.
I don't think they'd go with a 6-man rotation simply because I don't think giving the ball to Logan Gilbert and George Kirby and Luis Castillo less is a good idea in general. So I don't see them going to a 6-man. They might do it for a little while. If they want to do it for like a month, then I think you can make that work. But again, at the end of the year, you want to make sure Luis Castillo has his 32 starts. You want to make sure Logan Gilbert has his 32 starts. You want to, right? Like, would you rather have Luis Castillo get 28 starts or 32 starts? Right? Like it's just math. So if you go with a 6-man rotation, you're taking away starts from the guys you actually want to pitch, and you're giving them to Emerson Hancock, who, while he's certainly held his own, in 3 of the 4 starts, and he's given you a chance to win, he hasn't done anything that makes you believe that this is a guy who's, significantly better than, just giving the ball to Luis Castillo every 5 days instead of every 6 days. So, Hancock's done a nice job. He's certainly been a number 5, in most of his starts. And even yesterday, he was a little bit better than that. But I don't think he's the type of guy that you extend a 6-man rotation for. If they want to do it short term, just so that Woo can kind of build up and they can get that, maybe a turn or 2 through the rotation, they can get away with that. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to want to keep Hancock in line as well. So sending him down to Tacoma and just making that swap with Bryan Woo keeps him in the same rotation, keeps him in the same schedule, and he can kind of continue to build there. Because we have to remember too, Hancock is not a guy who, shouldn't have any innings caps or anything put on him. He is a guy who has never gotten through a full season either. So I think, sending him down and maybe short scripting him and kind of giving him a couple of weeks off in the middle of the year is something they'll want to do. So in the short term, it's possible, for the rest of the season, or even for the next 2 months, I don't see it. Maybe for a couple of weeks, but for a 2-month stretch, no, I don't think that's something they would do.
Yeah, they only have 3 off days between Tuesday and June 16th. All right, we got another question about Bryan Woo and more coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors and Monopoly Go. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Again, that is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I'm a very competitive person, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, but if not, it's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. The Mariners kick off a 3-game set with the Rangers tomorrow. Catch every pitch on the Mariners' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mariners. We're also going to be joined by Mariners broadcaster Gary Hill Jr. on tomorrow's show. Looking forward to that. Always fun checking in with Gary. Let's get back into your questions. Nate wants to know, with Bryan Woo's dominant first rehab start, any chance the M's just bring him up and let him throw 60 pitches versus the D-backs this weekend? I don't think so. I think he's going to get one more, and then I think we're looking at his season debut in Houston potentially.
Yeah, at least one more. First of all, we have to make sure that Bryan Woo came out of yesterday. Okay, how is he feeling today? How is he feeling tomorrow? Does he make his next start on time? These are all important things. And then what's the pitch count? I think he threw 35 pitches in this outing.
Not too sure.
I think it was 35 in 3 innings, struck out 5. I think it was 25 strikes. So if it was 35, 40 pitches, his next outing, probably 55 to 60 in there. And then in his next outing, in theory, at the big league level, he could probably go 75 pitches. So a lot of this might depend on like what the previous few days look like. Did they have to tax the bullpen in those games? Then maybe they just leave him down there for one more start because Hancock is built up where he can go 85, 90, 100 pitches. So I don't think it's a sure thing he's even up after this next rehab start, but he's certainly not going to be up after yesterday. They're going to want to see him go out there and do it again. And they're going to want to build the pitch count up more than, more than 60, I think, before he pitches in the big leagues. And plus, again, something to keep in mind here, Bryan Woo is a guy who you do kind of want to be careful with in terms of his workload this year as well. So if you don't have to call him up, if you can find a way to like, hey, Hancock pitched well against Arizona too, like let's push Woo back a day or something. Let's give him an extra day, or let's have him make his rehab assignment start in Tacoma, and then we'll push him back like 7 days or whatever, and then we'll call him up. Like they're going to be a little bit careful with Bryan Woo. But no, I don't think they're going to jump him straight to the big leagues.
Yeah, it is interesting that suddenly, partly because of the rain out on Friday, that him and Hancock are now lined up.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I assume that he's going to get at least one more rehab start. But like you said, we need to see if he made it out of yesterday. Totally fine. But assuming that he did, I think that Houston series, I believe that's May 3rd through the 5th. I think that's kind of the target area for Woo to make his season debut.
I think so too.
Next question here from David. How much of a different player is Julio if he doesn't have the home run power this year, but hits 285 and swipes 45 bags? Is he still an MVP candidate / top 10 player in the American League / MLB?
No.
He's going to get to his power.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and it's going to come in droves.
He'd still be a good player because the 285 batting average is well above league average.
Yeah.
You would also assume then that his on-base percentage would be 340, 350.
And when you pair that with his elite center field defense, still probably a 4-1 player, 3.5, 4-1 player.
All-star.
Yeah. So still a really good player, just not the player that you need Julio to be. Right.
I mean, like, and all you need from the power department, if Julio hits like 20 home runs, but hits like 40 doubles, and he's hitting 290 and 350, 360 on base, and he's stealing 45 bags, like that's a little disappointing in the power department, but that's still probably a 6-win player.
Yeah.
So
no, but he's gonna get to his power. How many home runs did he hit in his rookie year?
27.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that included 2 stints on the IL.
Mm-hmm.
And
he didn't hit his
first home run until my birthday, which was May 1st. Yeah.
Against Sandy Alcantara.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I remember that.
Absolute mammoth blast in Miami.
BT wants to know if the bottom of the lineup keeps producing, how far up will, say, Rojas slide, or does Scott value the second leadoff hitter that much?
I think the lineup is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see them moving JP off of the leadoff spot anytime in the next couple weeks, at least. Julio's pretty comfortable in the 2, and he's starting to produce right now.
Yeah.
And then, the 3, 4, 5, like, you're not moving Rojas up that high. So,
right. Like I said, I think it was last Monday that we answered a pretty similar question. Like, I wouldn't hate it if they wanted to try Rojas in the leadoff spot. I don't really think that it's necessary.
Sure.
I think we've seen some positive signs out of JP the last few games.
Sure. Again, JP also still has a ways to go, but starting to move in the right direction. And then you're not going to hit him over Haniger, Polanco, even Garver, really under any circumstances. So, I think the highest you can go is 7. But then you're not going to hit him ahead of Cal right now either. So probably 7, 8 is something like that. And you're choosing between 8 and 9. There's really not enough of a difference there in terms of quantity of at-bats to not just put him in the 9 and, let him get on base. And then that way, if JP doesn't, Julio still gets to hit with a guy on base. So I don't see them moving him up much higher than 7 would be the highest I can go. And if they don't want to go to 7, then they might as well go with 9 instead of 8. I think your worst hitter should probably hit 8. But obviously the difference between 8 and 9 isn't huge in terms of at-bats. So I don't see them moving up Rojas.
All right. We're going to answer a couple more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKDON, and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKDON. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Once again, the Mariners kick off a 3-game set with the Rangers tomorrow. Catch every pitch on the Mariners' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mariners. Max wants to know if Jonathan Clase continues to impact games and Luke Raley gets opportunities like he did in Game 2. Looked pretty solid, Max adds. Is there any chance Dominic Canzone doesn't have a spot when he's healthy? Of course, barring injuries. Hashtag keep winning the series. I can agree with that.
I suppose it's possible, but Clase's got to play a lot better than he is right now. I think there's this idea that Clase's just been incredible since he's come up, and he really hasn't. He's held his own. Like, he certainly doesn't look
he's certainly had an impact. I think the impact has outweighed the overall numbers, right? Because you look at the overall numbers, I think it's like an 80 WRC plus or something like that right now.
76.
Yeah.
250, 286, 330. Or
that's
300.
also a 5-game sample size.
Right, but it was also a 29 29% strikeout rate before he went 0 for 4 with no strikeouts yesterday. So these numbers can jump up and down pretty significantly in such a small sample. But overall, he hasn't been great. He hasn't been bad. Like there's nobody's saying he's been bad. And he's found a way in each game to make kind of a distinctive play, like something that helps the team win, with the exception of Sunday, the first game. Went over, though he did reach, and I believe he stole a base. So didn't end up mattering, but whatever. He's done a little bit of everything, in each of his starts to kind of help. So that's good. He hasn't looked overmatched or overwhelmed, but to me, he doesn't look like a guy who should be playing every day in the big leagues. Not yet. So we'll have to wait and see. Not only is it barring other people's injuries, but it's also barring Dominic Canzone. We don't know when Canzone's coming back.
Right.
Like, I have not heard an update since. So does he have a month to prove it? Does he have another 2 weeks? Like, that's going to matter quite a bit. So plus we haven't really seen the league make the adjustment to Class A yet.
Yeah.
So to me, like, if I had to make a decision today, Clase is going back down. He doesn't look like a guy who should be playing regularly at the big league level to me. Could that change in a month? Sure, it's possible. I would say it's unlikely. But yeah, if I had to make a decision today, Clase is the guy I send down. In a month, it's possible that Clase, is surviving still.
It's been 5 games. We have no idea.
Yeah.
We have no clue. Or 6 games, however many it's been. Like, we have no clue what Jonathan Clase really is yet. But he has made an impact in almost every single game that he's played in a pretty big way, I might add. But yeah, it's just, we need more time. This question would be better asked 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So this is pretty topical. Mariners Mojo wants to know, why are retractable roofs not mandated in the bigs? A game that is so weather dependent, you think this would be a requirement, especially in places that are prone to weather like Colorado, right?
Sure.
Look, I can get it if like Atlanta, you don't want to build a roof in Atlanta.
Even then, the heat. But a lot of the ballparks are older. In this, like, Coors Field is a beautiful ballpark, but it's older, right? Like, they didn't put a roof on it. I don't know how expensive it would be to just throw a roof over existing stadiums, but I'm going to guess somewhat very expensive. And this is a group.
But
of
Colby,
owners,
we know that major league owners, they love to spend money on their ball club.
Right. If there's one thing we know, just based on the last free agent period, is that owners care about not only player safety, not only paying the players a fair wage.
That's right.
But also giving the fans the experience they deserve. Those are the three most important things to MLB owners.
That's right.
And that's really the answer to your question.
But yeah, could you imagine them ever putting a roof on Fenway or Yankee Stadium? Like, that's never going to happen, right?
Nope. It just feels like.
But like, Minnesota, like some of these newer stadiums, though, like Minnesota
should have built a roof on theirs because that's new enough that they could have.
That should have been mandatory.
Target Field is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. I love that stadium. But just a retractable roof, baby.
Yeah.
Like, you could even do the T-Mobile thing where it's like, oh yeah, we closed the roof, but we're still an outdoor stadium. Right. You're not closed. It's not like Toronto where you're just closed in a dome now.
Which sucks, by the way. That takes Rogers Center down like 3-4 full grades when it's fully closed, especially after the renovations.
My favorite thing is like the Rangers, like they have a retractable roof, but their roof is just always closed. It's like, what's even the point?
It looks like a toaster too.
Yeah, I mean, it's ugly.
It's aesthetically horrible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Minute Maid is better aesthetics than the Rangers' new ballpark. Is it still Minute Maid? Yeah,
still Minute Maid.
But yeah, that's the real answer, is that they didn't do it at the beginning and now they're too cheap. Has any stadium added a roof recently? I don't think so. I think it has to.
Has any stadium ever added a roof?
I don't think so.
In any sport?
I think you have to build it when you're building the whole thing. Otherwise, I imagine it's an engineering nightmare. But I don't know. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. # not gambling advice. But the real answer is money. Owners don't want to spend it.
That's going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dan Gonzalez. And Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.